Welcome to the EIP dedicated series, PEEPanEIP, where we discuss an Ethereum improvement proposal, understand its importance, and talk about how it is going to make the Ethereum ecosystem even better. I'm your host, Pooja Ranjan, and we are joined by William Schwab from Ethereum Cat Herders, Mika, the EIP editor, and some community members, along with the author, of course. Today, we are going to talk about an interesting EIP 3156 flash loan. This is a standard track ERC and currently in review status. Created on November 15th, this is a fairly new proposal for a rapid growing use case in Ethereum ecosystem that is decentralized finance, also known as DeFi. To provide an overview of a maybe future standard for flash loan, we are joined by one of the authors, Alberto Cuesta, who is also the technical lead at Yield, a DeFi project, and USM, a stablecoin. So without further ado, let's welcome our author. Alberto, could you maybe introduce yourself and let our audiences know how you became the part of Ethereum community?
Hi, so I'm Alberto Cuesta Cañada. Everyone gets wrong the name, that's fine. So I'll be a little bit brief about me. I'm a little bit on the senior side, so I've been in IT for quite a while. I don't want to talk too much. I'm currently the lead engineer at Yield, a paradigm-backed fixed rate lending platform. That's what I do for during the day, and during the night I take side projects and hack away with them. Those side projects currently are USM Fam, which is a stablecoin, the one that you mentioned, with 10, which is the Ether wrapper. It's a new version, which is also the project that brought me to the EIP-3156, the flash lending. I did flash lending first for Yield. That's where I learned from Austin Williams and Georgios what the pattern was. Then when I got involved with the new Ether wrapper, I said, hey, I don't know how to do flash lending. Let's put this into as well. And then discussing that with Fubulobu from here, we said, there should be a standard for this. Let's do a standard. Let's do an ERC. It will be fun. And so here we are. And before doing all this fun stuff, I was a lead blockchain instructor at Beyond Skills, and now disappeared, and partner at a blockchain consultancy. Now as well disappeared. Things disappear. It's fine. So that's how I've been here. And now since I'm involved in Web 10, EIP-3156, USM Fam and Yield, I kind of have my fingers in all pies. So that's who I am, I guess.
Nice to hear that. So I believe for today's EIP, we have a small presentation that you would like to share with our audiences.
Yeah, sure. Should I share it from my desktop then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So then let me move it appropriately so that it shows nice and big, and share screen. Is that big enough, or should I share it in some different way?
That's great.
That's good. Okay, so I've already talked about me. Now let me do a little bit of a small introduction about flash loans themselves. A lot of people will have heard about flash loans, but still the pattern is a little bit complicated, and people often get it confused. So flash loans at its simplest are just cryptocurrency loans that are repaid before the end of the transaction, meaning that in real world terms are loans of 0 seconds duration. I give you the money, but you give it back to me right now. They last for only for the 15 seconds that it lasts a block or less. I'll explain what that is useful for, but I'll explain first why is that so amazing. The 15-second loan that is repaid within an Ethereum transaction, it's actually amazing because it means that there is 0 risk for the lender to lend that money. When lenders lend us money, they need to have some kind of guarantee that we are going to repay the loan. And that introduces a lot of friction in lending. In flash loans, since it's all within an Ethereum transaction, there is no risk. If the borrower fails to repay the money within that transaction, the loan never happened. The computation doesn't get included in the block, so it's actually zero risk for the lender. I give you the money, but if you don't give it back to me, it's fine. I never gave you the money in the first place. Magic. So that's pretty cool that you can have a loan with zero risk for lenders. Now the only problem is, so I can have a loan that I know it will be repaid for sure. So, but it only lasts for like 15 seconds. What can I do with that for 15 seconds? It turns out that you can do a bunch of stuff. First, you can use it to exploit other contracts. Great. So that's the most known use case. And when we were starting with Web 10 and this ERC, we had to fight a little bit against the perception that all that you can do with flash loans is actually to exploit other smart contracts, which is a use. A flash loan, in effect, is kind of free money for the borrower as well, because often there are no fees. The lender has no risk, so it charges no fees. So here you got a bunch of free money as long as you give it back to me within 15 seconds. Now you do whatever. And hackers can use that to exploit vulnerabilities in contracts, since it can be a hefty amount of money. Developers might not have thought that someone might have a few million DAI or more than that to play with. So initially it was used a lot for exploits, and it still is. You see flash loans in most of the exploits that you see currently. But that's just a kind of use case that we are trying to protect ourselves with this ERC as well. So we are trying to make sure that flash loans are not used for exploits as much as we are trying that flash loans will be used for productive uses. Okay, exploiting is fine, but we don't do it during our day job. Second use case, very famous, is arbitraging. You will know a bunch of people from Twitter that they have their arbitraging bots and they run liquidations, or they move crypto between exchanges, or things like that. Flash loans can be used for this. Basically, if an exchange is trading at a very different price from another exchange, you can take a flash loan, get a lot of money to buy assets from one exchange, sell them on the other, make a profit. That's not bad. That's a positive use case because basically it makes the exchanges have a more reliable and consistent price. So in a sense, that's quite useful. It's still not the use case that makes me more excited about, which is a use case that will be a lot closer to people when they actually start seeing it used, which is refinance. Such a boring sounding name, refinance. No, it's actually quite cool. So refinance is, for example, what DeFi Saver does when you go to their platform and says, could you please move my assets from my positions from Avi to Compound, or vice versa? Basically, if one platform is giving you a better interest rate for your savings than another, you can move assets across. That gets difficult if you actually did something like putting your collateral in Compound, take a loan of some other asset like DAI, and then use the DAI somewhere. You don't have the DAI to get your assets back, and it's difficult to move around. With a flash loan, you can actually move positions very easily between platforms. You can see that in DeFi Saver. I've personally coded privately, they're not public yet, a couple of similar solutions for yield. And I can tell you that it's a very powerful thing. When refinance use cases are more widely used, you will see that assets in the Ethereum blockchain start being a lot more liquid. So when it's a lot cheaper to actually move your assets and your debt and your positions between platforms around, you will start seeing a lot of use, and all of these will be backed by flash loans. And this is just the start. There are other use cases that we should see in the future. This morning, Fiona Kobayashi, which is in our ERC group, released something where you can actually delegate the paying bit of a flash loan. You can build financial instruments with this. It will be useful for sure. And we cannot wait until all the use cases are known really before we do the standard, because now that it's in its infancy, is easier to actually manage to get a consistent approach between all lenders. Later, when the pledges are very, very established, it will be more difficult. So now is the time. That's, I think, a good introduction as for flash loans. Well, last thing I wanted to say about flash loans is that there are two kinds, which will be more important before, but I would like to explain. There are the flash loans themselves, which is when a platform like Avi or Compound has some asset, like for example DAI, and Flash lends that DAI. That's a flash loan. There is also Flash Mint, which is when a contract itself can mint the token, for example, with, and it can actually flash lend that token that it can mint. So I am the wrapped Ether contract, and I offer a flash lending solution. I don't need anyone to have given me with for me to lend, because I created from nothing. So if I want to give you a flash loan of 1 trillion with, I can, because I just create them. And that opens a certain amount of fun possibilities and risks much greater. But anyway, those are the two terms, flash loan, flash mint. From the point of view of the borrower, they're the same. Unless you are really, really interested in borrowing 1 trillion of some token, doesn't really mind. So those are flash loans.
Great. That's actually, that I'd say covered about 50% of the questions that I had already had prepared, just to try and trick out what flash loans are, sort of give motivation for all of this. Maybe just to roll off of the last thing that you were talking about. So what does it take? What does a protocol need to have as a prerequisite to be able to offer a flash loan? And I'm assuming that there should be a massive difference here between a flash loan and a flash mint, because obviously by a flash loan, you actually have to have those assets in reserve to be able to lend them out. Whereas by a flash minting, theoretically, I mean, is there any prerequisite for a platform to be able to offer a flash mint?
Very few, actually. If you are comfortable with code, I can go to the code and show you.
Sure.
So just from the reference implementation that I'm going to go, reference implementation that I have here. So let's see how a flash minter goes. So this is just an ERC-20 token. That's it.
Do you mind increasing the size a little bit?
How do I do that?
Control plus.
That might work.
Great. Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you. So if I'm a basic ERC-20 and I want to offer flash loans of myself, only thing I have to do is to implement these two functions that say how much can I lend, which might be the maximum. There's an error there, but it's fine. And how much am I going to charge? Which in this case is 0, basically, or a fee, but basically it's just a simple function that says this much I'm going to charge. And for the actual action of lending myself, you need to implement this function, which is the interface of the standard for the lender, which says from the point of view of the borrower is, I want to flash loan, send the tokens to the receiver. This is the actual token I want to borrow. This is how much I want to borrow. And this is some random data that I just want you to pass to the receiver, okay? The flash minter just needs to check that the token that the borrower is asking is himself. That's great. Then it calculates the fee. It mints the amount on the receiver. Then it calls on the receiver this callback, which is basically saying, I've sent you this many tokens of this token. You need to repay the amount plus this fee. I got this data to pass you along. And this is the account that initiated the loan. It's just calling this function. Okay.
I see.
And then, yep.
What uses are there for the? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off in the middle, but I'll just throw the question in now. What uses are there for that data that's being passed around?
The lender doesn't do anything with that data. It's because the borrower, the receiver of the tokens, which often is the same person as the borrower, might want to know something about the flash loan. Since this has a pattern where the borrower calls this function, and this function does a callback on the receiver, this receiver just has a plain public function called onFlashLoan and might not know what's going on. For example, the borrower might be getting this flash loan to do a refinance deal on a certain user account, which is not the receiver. The receiver is probably the same lending platform or whatever. So probably let me show you an example. So in that data, when I have other wrappers, for example, the DYDX one. So when I had to do a flash loan for DYDX, I had the problem that DYDX doesn't give you a bunch of stuff, doesn't tell you who originated the flash loan, who's the receiver, or the token address, or anything like that. DYDX just gives you the tokens and little more. So I needed to send some data to the receiver of the flash loan so that he would know what's going on, because otherwise it would just be one function and okay, I've got a function back. Someone has called this function. Now what do I do? So you need that data parameter often to basically tell the receiver of the assets what to do.
If I'm understanding you right, so one of the things that you can use the data for is that even if specific platforms have flash loans implemented differently, you're able to use the data to create sort of a standard data structure that can then be passed around more like, well, I guess standardly, that's the point of the standard, I suppose, that no matter what data comes in, you're able to format that in a standard format.
Yeah, for example, the receiver of the flash loan might have two options that are both enabled by a flash loan. Maybe one is to migrate assets from A to B, and the other option is to migrate assets from B to A on the other direction. Since there is only one callback on flash loan, the receiver has no way of knowing if it's moving assets from A to B or B to A kind of option. So you pack that in the data parameter to say, okay, I've flash loaned all this stuff for you, and all this is in the context of migrating stuff from Avi to Compound. So now please do that.
Does that mean that there is actually a standard format for the data inside the standard? Okay.
No, that's completely chosen by the user of the flash loans. So if I'm DeFi saver, for example, and I'm taking flash loans from Avi to do stuff, basically is DeFi saver calling Avi, and then Avi calling DeFi saver, because okay, I get the flash loan from you, and then you call me to tell me that I've got the loan in my contract. But when you call me, I need to know what did I ask you the flash loan for. So basically it will be DeFi saver saying to Avi, okay, give me all this cash, and then when you call me back, tell me that it is to move assets from Compound to Avi, or Compound to whatever.
I see. Interesting. You mentioned before that Fubulubu had mentioned to you that he thought this should have a standard. I think we're probably touching on this a little bit as we talk about the data, But what would you say the main rationale for creating a standard around around flash loans is? What benefit is there from having a standardized version of flash loans?
So basically, right now you have these providers. You have IB, V1 and V2, DYDX, Uniswap, and Yield. They are all providers of flash loans, and there must be others as well. And there are many others on the pipeline. There is Sushi Schwab and MakerDAO and Weth and God knows who else. I think that this is going to be used a lot in the future because it's a source of revenue for any asset that you hold. And one problem right now is that if you want to take a flash loan, you need to know how to do it for each specific provider. And some of them are quite complicated. The situation until now has been that Avi was very, very easy to use, but it charged 0.09%, which is not much, but it's something. You could also get flash loans for free from DYDX, but their interface was hard. So very few people use them, even if they were free. And you can also get flash loans from Uniswap that are much more expensive than Avi, but they are also quite hard to do. But they also have the positive that you have a really large amount of tokens. Any token that you can trade in Uniswap, you can take a flash loan from, but it's not easy. With a standard, just telling the lenders, okay, could you just please offer a common function when someone wants a flash loan? You can actually go, once you learn the standard, you don't need to learn separately how to flash loan from Avi, DYDX, Uniswap, now SushiSwap, now MakerDAO with. It's a little bit hard to learn how to do something, how to get the same service in different ways from all these providers.
If these platforms wanted to use ERC-3156, would that mean that they would have to re-implement their flash loans? Would they have to migrate contracts?
Yes, but I am expecting that these companies will implement the standard either most likely in the next version. And also to facilitate this, I've already coded the wrappers for Avi, DYDX, Uniswap, and Yield, so that you can call the wrapper using the ERC-3156 interface, and the wrapper internally does a flash loan to any of these providers. So you don't really need to change anything right now. Right now, with these wrappers I've done, you can use the same interface to get a flash loan from anyone. Not a problem at all. It's just a little bit more gassy than in the future, when I expect that these providers in the new versions will implement the standard natively, so that there are less tokens moving from the lender to the wrapper and then to the user.
Very interesting. I was debating if I should make a gas price joke, but I think I'll pass on it in the meantime.
No, well, I can make some. I only deployed one of the wrappers because right now I'm not really in the mood to deploy anything to the mainnet until this comes down.
Yeah,
No,
600 Quay gas. Yeah, not the time for deploying.
I have a fun story actually about how useful this is. So I'm coding now an MIP for MakerDAO that is quite unrelated to all this, and I found at some point of coding this MIP that hold on, I could do this easy with a flash loan, because I have these tokens that are locked here, and I need to redeem them for some assets, but they are locked, so I can't. So I need to undo my position somehow. And I think, okay, I can do this easily with a flash loan. And I know that SG McPherson is coding MIP-25, the flash lending module for DAI. So I thought, okay. So he's in my group. He's going to use ERC-3156. I already know what's the standard. I can just implement this, knowing that he will actually, when he releases, he will release with this standard. I can start working now. And if he, for some reason, MIP 25 doesn't happen, not a problem either because it's the standard. I can just change one address and borrow my assets from DYDX. Same code, not a problem. So it's useful for me, at least.
Very interesting. I mean, yeah, so I think that highlights also that it allows for anyone who wants to integrate in the future a much easier format for doing that. Your point with DYDX is, at the end is very interesting to me also. I mean, you're talking about making an integration to Maker, but then it would be flash loaning off of DYDX. But I'm assuming also in that instance that probably nobody who's actually using it would even realize that that's what happened underneath unless they're going to go through their transactions and like just look at where everything was coming from.
No, the contract, the smart contract that I did for testing flash loans is actually quite fun to use because it just offers a single interface that says, give me the lender address, give me the token address and how much you want to borrow. And you can say, okay, so let's borrow from Avi this much DAI. That's the whole thing. Then you go to the interface, say, okay, try to borrow the same DAI, but this time from Uniswap. That's the whole thing. So it's very easy to switch between providers. It's the same interface.
I also wanted to ask you if you see a specific advantage to your implementation. You were talking before about certain platforms having flash loans that were harder to access or easier to access. Do you see an advantage to your implementation? Or I suppose alternatively, what makes a flash loan easier and what makes it harder?
There are pros and cons, like everything in life. The sweet spot that I'm trying to achieve with this ERC is to offer a basic service that is easy and safe to use. And in that, I have the help of a lot of people that actually know a lot about all this. So in terms of safety, I know that the ERC will provide higher safety than almost any other flash loan there. Well, or at least it will expose what are the risks of using a flash loan and how do you need to act in order to trust who is initiating the loan and to avoid being exploited by someone sending you fake data, as I think it happened with DeFi Saver quite recently, although they managed to do a white hat saving of that. This standard is being designed so that it is easy to do it safely, okay, and it's easy to do it. But it's not the end of all flash loans. There is a bunch of features that they are not included in the standard because they make the standard more complicated and maybe they are not features that everyone is going to use. With this standard, I don't think that every possible flash lending feature should be included in the standard, only the basic service. So for example, Avi offers batch flash loans where instead of taking a flash loan of DAI, you take at one go a flash loan of DAI with USDC and something else, and you get all the tokens at the same time. That's cool, and some people using DeFi Saver uses it to move all your positions at the same time from Avi to Compound and vice versa, and so on. But I think that's a feature that it will be used only by 10% or less of the users. So that's not in the standard right now. Okay, the standard offers something simple that can be used by everyone safely. The lenders can offer more stuff. So batch flash loans is an example. I think that Uniswap also offers some other things that are not in the standard. But if you need those advanced features, you should go to Uniswap. Avi also offers a very cool feature where you actually don't need to repay the flash loan. It becomes debt at the end of the flash loan. So in which sense is better? It's simple, it's safe. In which sense is worse? It doesn't offer all the features. If you want all the features, you need to go to the non-standard features of the lender.
And that's definitely the pattern that we've seen out of, I mean, most prominently RC20. I mean, anyone who's familiar with the Open Zeppelin suite knows that you've got the RC20 and then you've got like 15 different variants adding different, like, you know, burnability or numerability or snapshotting or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I'd say the most successful ERCs definitely have tried following a pattern like that. You did mention briefly that there's a certain amount of safety that's built into this. What would it mean for there to be an unsafe flash loan if the loan has to be repaid inside the same transaction?
Okay, so for example, an unsafe flash loan for the lender might be, for example, where you accidentally let someone take a flash loan of something like DAI. For example, you are a compound and you are flash lending DAI, and then the borrower takes that DAI and deposits it into compound, back into compound. The flash loan function thinks that you have returned the flash loan, but what you actually did was deposit it, and you have got the seed DAI for free because the way of the accounting was done in the future. That's one of the vulnerabilities that we very recently designed against, because there is a way of actually allowing a flash lender to accept the assets that is lending back and do the accounting properly. That's one example. In yield, one vulnerability that we had that we needed to log functions for is that you could actually take a flash loan of the native currency, FYDAI, after maturity and then redeem it. And since there were no limits, you could actually use that to cause yield to go into liquidation in MakerDAO. We are backed by MakerDAO. So we needed to lock the redeem function to avoid that. With this ERC, that wouldn't have happened, because now we know better how to code these things so that you can actually let people to borrow, to take a loan on the currency that you are also going to accept as another part of your platform. Other vulnerabilities are, for example, the thing about trusted data. The callback needs by nature to be open to anyone. So in DeFi Saver, you could call the callback with data that you make up, and you would make DeFi Saver do things that it shouldn't do. You could trick DeFi Saver to make it think that you are Avi, and that DeFi Saver should send tokens to the proxy, which is not actually the proxy, is your own wallet address. So you could use the callback to just grab money from DeFi Saver. We put the tools in the standard so that you can authenticate who actually initiated the loan and who actually is the lender, so that you can trust the other data, like the amount that was lended, the fee, and that random, not arbitrary data structure. So we also put tools in place so that that DeFi Saver hack cannot happen again.
I see Micah put in the trust that wouldn't be in the chat that wouldn't be considered trustlessly, and it would need atomic batch transactions on layer 1 to achieve that. If I'm understanding that right.
That was in response to the gossip chat.
Oh, that was to, okay, I understand. My mistake. I thought that might be related to the last thing you said. I actually wanted to circle back to something that you mentioned before about refinancing and maybe try and zoom in on that a bit. I had a bit of trouble understanding myself about exactly how a flash loan could be used to make refinancing easier or better done. Could you explain it a bit more?
Okay, so I will leak some alpha now. Congratulations to the listeners. So, for example, imagine that you have put Ether in MakerDAO and you have taken a DAI loan, okay? And then that DAI, you have used it for something else. Maybe you bought a Lambo with it. You don't have the DAI anymore, but you have the debt in MakerDAO. And the stability fee in MakerDAO starts going up. It was at 0% when you borrowed, and now it's 5%. And you find out that some other platform also lends DAI using Ether as a collateral, but it has a rate of 2%. So you think, I would prefer to have my Ether collateral in this other platform and my debt in this other platform. So I would be paying a 2% interest rate instead of a 5%. Imagine that it's just a mortgage. You took your mortgage with bank A and bank B offers you a better interest rate. You want to move it across. You cannot just take your Ether out of MakerDAO because first you need to repay your debt, and you don't have that money because you bought that Lamborghini. Bad luck. With a flash loan, you can take the DAI from Avi, for example, use that DAI to repay your debt in MakerDAO. Now that you have repaid your debt in MakerDAO, you can get your Ether. Now you can get your Ether and you put it in the other platform, let's say Compound. And now you borrow the DAI in Compound at a better rate, 2%, which you use to pay the flash loan. So you started with Ether and Ether collateral and DAI debt in MakerDAO, which was charging you X, and you end with the same Ether collateral and the same DAI debt in some other platform, let's say Compound, which is charging you X minus 1.
I understand. That's really interesting. As one last question from my end, and I think Pooja has a couple about the EIP process afterwards. On a slightly unrelated but DeFi relevant note, as someone who's working extensively with flash loans, what would you say the purpose, place, and meaning of audits are in the DeFi space? What should they signify? What should it mean to a user when they see a platform is audited? What does it cover? What doesn't it cover?
In generic terms or in flash loan terms?
I'd be interested in either or both, personally.
Okay. So as the subject of several audits myself, what you get as a developer when you get audited is, and depends a lot on the quality of the auditing. Not all audits are the same. You get a fresh pair of eyes, often with a very specific experience to go through your code. The DeFi products, most of them are done by very, very small teams. I basically coded the yield smart contracts by myself with help from Alan and Dan and Georgios, but 90% of the code is mine with them overlooking. When we contracted Trail of Bits to look through the code that we had gone ourselves, they did discover a bunch of vulnerabilities. They actually discovered the flash loan vulnerability that I was talking about. And they also introduced me to fuzzing, and they did a bunch of things to make our code tighter. Does that mean that the code is completely safe? No. I mean, an auditing is just that. An auditing is a guarantee that someone else, and who that someone else is important, that someone else has gone through the code and has looked through it. Is it, if the code had maybe a 50-50 chance of being hacked, after an audit by a firm that they know what they are doing and they take your time, maybe it's 90% safe. It's never going to be 100% safe because we are all human, you know. So it's just another one in a list of things that you should look for before you trust a contract completely. It's just another thing.
I think that's a really good take. I mean, in general, I think we see a lot of people in the space who understand, like, have some kind of understanding that as soon as they see an audit stamp, it must mean that something is absolutely bulletproof and, you know, will never have anything happen to it. And it's, in general, it's just not the reality. I mean, if you ask somebody in 2005, they definitely wouldn't have thought that Lehman Brothers was going to go under, to give an American example. But yeah.
To be even more specific about that, I've often been accused of doing the brown M&M test on auditors and leaving some vulnerabilities in the code just to see if they find them. And sometimes they don't.
Really? Aha.
It might or might not have been intentional. I can't confirm nor deny.
Yeah, well, all right, I'm gonna pass the things over to Pooja. She has a couple of questions on the EIPs. Great, thank you.
My pleasure, thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful question answer session, both to William and Alberto. I think those are really helpful. So one more question I have with regards to status. Currently, I see that this is in the review status, which I believe is the most appropriate one for this proposal at the time. It leaves with like 2 more statuses before it can be standard, like last call and final.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, like you are here and Micah is also here, the EIP editor who is reviewing the proposal. So maybe first you may answer and then Micah can add like more information on when do you think this proposal would be ready to move to the last call?
I think we might be ready pretty soon. If you follow the conversation in Ethereum Magicians, the guys from Schwab, difficult to pronounce, made a further review on the standard, and they actually raised 2 issues that were raised to me before. One of them by Mika, and the other one by the Avi guys, which are the ones that actually led me to think more about what needs to be inside the standard and what needs to be outside the standard. I think that when we get an answer about these 2 remaining questions, which are batch flash loans and whether we can have arbitrary receivers for the loan, when we find an agreement on those 2 questions, I think we will be ready to move to last call.
So I find in the comment that it is mentioned almost review. So I was wondering, like, do we have the status of review? I'm a little confused over there.
Yeah, it's PR is out to move it to review. I need to do another read over of it before I merge. So
great. So yeah, it sounds all good to me. And yeah, that was my only question related to process part. I think this was a very wonderful presentation and discussion that we had around DeFi projects. I'm sure it is going to be helping dApp developers and other projects who are planning to implement this standard in their projects. So generally, security consideration is important for any upcoming proposal, but when it comes to like finance and decentralized finance, I think a lot more eyes revolve around the security consideration, especially after the recent attack on one of the DeFi projects. Glad to know that it is already taken care of. So I would like to thank you for your time and explaining these things for our viewers.
My pleasure. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and it's been a pleasure to discuss all these things about flash loans that I find lots of fun. Thanks very much for your time.
Great. So for viewers who are new to our show, we have also recorded a DeFi governance proposal, that is EIP-2535 Diamond Standard. That is not in a final state yet, but if people are interested, and some of the popular DeFi projects are already implementing that, you can give it a watch. That also contains very good questions around decentralized finance. If you like this episode, do like, hit, and share button. If you have questions that could not be answered in today's episode, feel free to leave a comment, or you can directly ask from the author. His Twitter ID would be in the description section, along with the other guest. Learning a new proposal is always interesting, and I'm sincerely thankful to all the EIP authors who have signed up to join us for going an extra mile to make it even simpler for Ethereum community. Continuing the journey, we'll be joined by Vitalik Buterin and Martin Swende, the authors of EIP-2929 and EIP-2930 in the next episode. So stay tuned, keep Keep sharing your love with Ethereum cat herders. Don't forget to subscribe to Ethereum cat herders YouTube channel. This is all of us signing out.